Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The crystal goblet shattered against the marble wall, spraying crimson vintage like arterial spray, and for a terrifying second, Julian didn't know if the rage in Lord Alaric's eyes was going to end with a dismissal or a decapitation. Pathetic? Alaric hissed, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards, straight into the marrow of Julian's bones. The alpha vampire, the scourge of the north, the absolute ruler of the obsidian citadel, loomed over the trembling Omega. I asked for the 24 vintage, you incompetent wretch. Not this swill. Clean it up. With your hands. Julian dropped to his knees instantly. He didn't flinch at the cruelty. He had been inoculated against it by 6 months of hell. He flinched because the man looking at him with such utter, icy contempt was the same man who, a year ago, had sworn upon the ancient blood moon that he would burn the world before letting a single tear fall from Julian's cheek. But Alaric didn't remember the blood moon. He didn't remember the vows. And he certainly didn't remember Julian. The hierarchy of the obsidian citadel was simple. The vampires ruled, the humans served, and Omegas like Julian were a delicacy to be either coddled or broken. Julian, once the secret consort to the High Lord himself, was now lower than the dirt on the unspoken boots of the guards. As Julian picked up the shards of glass, a sharp edge sliced into his thumb. He hissed, a bead of bright, sweet-smelling blood welling up. Above him, Alaric stiffened. The scent of an Omega's blood was potent, but Julian's blood was different. To Alaric, it smelled like a memory he couldn't place. Like winter jasmine and old libraries. Like safety. Like home. It was a scent that infuriated him because it made his dead heart ache with a phantom limb pain he couldn't diagnose. Get out, Alaric snarled, turning his back, his black velvet cape swirling around his broad shoulders. You reek. Yes, my lord, Julian whispered. He clutched his bleeding hand to his chest and retreated, backing out of the grand study with his head bowed. Once in the safety of the damp stone corridor, Julian leaned against the cold wall and exhaled a shaky breath. His heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Every day was a gamble. Every interaction was a roll of the dice. When Alaric had been found in the snowy wastes 6 months ago, half dead from a battle with the southern covens, his mind had been shattered. The healers had pieced his body back together, but his memories of the last 2 years, the exact duration of his romance with Julian, were wiped clean. To Alaric, Julian was just another war prize, a servant inherited from a conquered house. Why didn't Julian leave? Because of the mark. Julian pulled the collar of his rough linen shirt down slightly, revealing the scarred, intricate bite mark on the junction of his neck and shoulder. It was silver and faded, dormant. A bonded Omega could not leave their alpha. Distance caused physical pain. Separation meant a slow, withering death. Alaric's amnesia had severed the psychic connection, leaving the bond one-sided. Julian could feel Alaric's rage, his hunger, his coldness, while Alaric felt nothing but a vague, inexplicable irritation whenever Julian was near. Still alive, pretty thing? Julian snapped his head up. Standing at the end of the hall was Silas, the Citadel's spymaster. A vampire with a face like a choir boy and a soul like a sewer. Lord Silas, Julian murmured, straightening up. He still doesn't know, does he? Silas walked closer, his steps silent. He trailed a cold finger down Julian's jaw. The great Lord Alaric, reduced to a moody tyrant, unaware that his soulmate is scrubbing his floors. It is not my place to remind him, Julian said, his voice tight. The healers said forced memories could shatter his mind permanently. So noble, Silas sneered. Or maybe you just like the degradation. Maybe you realized you were never fit to rule beside him. Excuse me, Lord Silas. I have duties. Julian tried to step past, but Silas grabbed his arm. Tonight is the blood solstice banquet, Silas whispered, his fangs lengthening slightly. Lady Vespera is arriving. She intends to claim Alaric as her mate. And you know what happens to the former playthings when a new matriarch takes over. Julian's blood ran cold. Vespera. The woman was a sadist notorious for skinning her rivals. If she smelled the dormant mating scent on Julian, she wouldn't just kill him. She would make it a week-long festival of agony. I will stay out of sight, Julian said. See that you do, Silas released him. Or I might have to dispose of you myself, as a favor to the Lord. The grand hall was a cavernous masterpiece of Gothic architecture, lit by thousands of floating candles. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood wine and the heavy, cloying perfumes of the vampire aristocracy. Julian was supposed to be in the kitchens, but a shortage of staff meant he was pressed into service, carrying heavy trays of meat to the high table. He kept his head down, his hair falling over his eyes, praying to the silent gods that he would remain invisible. At the head of the table sat Alaric. He looked like a dark god, clad in armor of obsidian and silver, his pale skin glowing in the candlelight. Beside him sat Lady Vespera. She was stunning and terrifying, draped in red silk that left little to the imagination. Her hand rested possessively on Alaric's forearm, her sharp nails digging into the leather of his bracer. You seem distracted, my lord, Vespera purred, leaning close to his ear. Is the wine not to your liking? Alaric swirled the dark liquid in his glass, his red eyes scanning the room restlessly. He felt it again, that itch, that phantom pull. It was stronger tonight. Every time that small, dark-haired servant passed by, the beast inside Alaric's chest growled. It wasn't hunger. It was possessiveness. Why would he want to possess a human servant? The wine is adequate, Alaric replied deeply, his voice bored. Perhaps you need a different kind of entertainment, Vespera suggested, her eyes gleaming. She snapped her fingers. Julian, who had been refilling a goblet for a minor noble, froze. You there? Vespera called out, pointing a long, manicured finger at Julian. The one with the trembling hands. Come here. Julian's breath hitched. He couldn't refuse. To refuse a noble was death. He walked slowly toward the dais, the heavy silver pitcher in his hands shaking slightly. He could feel Alaric's gaze on him, heavy, crushing, intense. Pour for me, Vespera commanded. Julian stepped forward. As he tilted the pitcher, Vespera moved her glass subtly. Just an inch. It was a classic trap. The wine missed the glass and splashed onto the red silk of her dress. The hall went silent. Vespera shrieked, a sound like tearing metal. She stood up, backhanding Julian across the face with preternatural speed. The blow sent Julian sprawling across the stone steps of the dais. The pitcher clattered away, ringing loudly. Julian tasted copper. His lip was split. You clumsy filth, Vespera hissed, her face contorting into a mask of predatory rage. You've ruined it. This silk was spun by the shadow weavers of the East. Alaric watched, his face impassive, but his fingers gripped the arms of his throne so hard the wood splintered. Why did the sight of the boy bleeding on the floor make him want to tear Vespera's throat out? She was his guest. The boy was a servant. Logic dictated he should execute the servant to appease the guest. But his instincts were screaming, *protect. Mine. Hurt. I apologize, my lady, Julian gasped, trying to push himself up. Apologies are for equals, Vespera spat. She grabbed a steak knife from the table. I'll take a pound of flesh for every drop of wine. She lunged. It happened in a blur. Before the knife could touch Julian, a hand clad in an obsidian gauntlet caught Vespera's wrist. The sound of bones grinding filled the silence. Alaric, Vespera gasped, her eyes widening in shock. Alaric stood between them, a wall of dark power. His eyes were not just red. They were glowing with a feral luminosity. He looked down at Julian, who was cowering at his feet, and then back at Vespera. He is my servant, Alaric said, his voice devoid of emotion, yet terrifyingly final. I do not permit others to break my toys. He ruined my dress, Vespera shrieked, trying to yank her hand away. "I will buy you 1,000 dresses," Alaric said, shoving her back with enough force that she stumbled. "Sit down, Vespera. Or leave." He turned to Julian. For a second, their eyes met. Julian saw confusion in the Alpha's gaze, a storm of warring impulses. "Get out of my sight," Alaric commanded, though the voice lacked its usual venom. "Go to my chambers. Wait for me there," the court whispered. To be sent to the Lord's chambers usually meant punishment. But Julian knew Alaric. Or he knew the man Alaric used to be. Julian scrambled up and fled the hall. The Lord's chambers were a sanctuary of dark wood, tapestries, and the scent of cedar and rain. It smelled like him. Julian stood by the heavy oak desk, hugging himself to stop the trembling. Why had Alaric saved him? Was it just pride? Or was the wall of amnesia cracking? The heavy doors groaned open. Alaric entered, shedding his cape and tossing it onto a chair. He paced the room like a caged tiger, the energy radiating off him making the air crackle. "Why?" Alaric asked, his back to Julian. He stared into the fireplace. "Why do you affect me?" "I am just a servant, my lord," Julian whispered. Alaric spun around, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. He grabbed Julian's chin, forcing his head up. His grip was firm but not painful. He examined Julian's face, tracing the bruise forming on his cheek where Vespera had struck him. "You are not just a servant," Alaric murmured, his eyes searching Julian's. "I have killed armies. I have slaughtered kings. I feel nothing. But when she struck you, I felt rage." He leaned in, inhaling deeply at the curve of Julian's neck. Julian stopped breathing. This was dangerous. If Alaric smelled the mark he had made, he might think Julian was a spy sent to entrap him with blood magic. "You smell of fear," Alaric whispered, "and lavender, and something else." Alaric's nose brushed against the collar of Julian's shirt. He hooked a finger into the fabric and pulled it aside. The mark. Alaric froze. The silver scars of a mating bite were unmistakable. They were complex, weaving into the skin like a brand of ownership. But more importantly, the magical signature radiating from the mark was familiar. It was his signature. Alaric stumbled back as if struck physically. He clutched his head, his pupils dilating. "What sorcery is this?" Alaric roared, the confusion turning to menace. "Who put my mark on you? Speak." "You did?" Julian cried out, tears finally spilling over. "You did. 2 years ago, in the Garden of Esh. You swore yourself to me. Liar!" Alaric grabbed a vase and hurled it at the wall. "I would never mate with a human. I would never weaken my bloodline." "You didn't care about bloodlines then." Julian stepped forward, driven by a desperate courage. "You cared about us. You took the draft of oblivion to hide the location of the Omega resistance, but the magic took too much. It took me." "Draft of oblivion," Alaric whispered. The words triggered a sharp spike of pain in his temples. A flash of a memory, a green vial, a rainy night, a hand holding his. Asterisk, "I will come back to you. I promise." Asterisk, "No," Alaric groaned, sinking to his knees, clutching his skull. "Get out. Get out before I kill you." "I won't." Julian dropped to his knees in front of the Alpha. He reached out, cupping Alaric's face. "Kill me if you must. But look at me. Look at me, Alaric." The contact was the key. Skin to skin. Intent to intent. The mental dam broke. It wasn't a gentle stream. It was a tsunami. Alaric gasped, his back arching. Asterisk, Julian laughing in the snow. Julian sleeping in his bed. Julian kissing his wounds. The taste of Julian's skin. The sheer, overwhelming, terrifying love he felt for this fragile creature. Asterisk, the memories slammed into place with the force of a physical blow. The coldness in Alaric's eyes shattered, replaced by a horror so profound it looked like madness. He looked at Julian, really looked at him. For the first time in 6 months. He saw the thinness of his frame, the rough servant's clothes, the bruise on his cheek, the cut on his hand. He saw what he had done. He had enslaved his own husband. He had treated his heart like garbage. Julian. The name came out as a broken rasp. Julian sobbed, collapsing forward into Alaric's chest. "Oh gods!" Alaric whispered, his arms wrapping around Julian instantly, crushing him against his armor. "Oh gods, what have I done? You're back!" Julian wept into the cold metal of the breastplate. "You're back!" Alaric buried his face in Julian's hair, inhaling the scent he had been starving for. But the relief was short-lived, replaced immediately by a cold, lethal fury directed at himself, and at anyone who had dared to touch what was his. "Did I?" Alaric's voice trembled. "Did I hurt you? You didn't know?" Julian soothed him, though his body was still shaking. "It wasn't you. I made you scrub floors." Alaric choked out, horrified. "I let them speak to you like. I let Vespera strike you." The name acted like a summon. The heavy doors blew open with a blast of wind magic. Lady Vespera stood there, flanked by two of her guards and Silas. "I knew it," Vespera hissed, her eyes glowing green. "I knew there was something foul about this human. He has bewitched you, Alaric." Alaric slowly rose to his feet. He didn't let go of Julian. He tucked the Omega behind him, shielding him completely with his massive frame. When Alaric looked at Vespera, there was no confusion left. There was no political maneuvering. There was only the Alpha, the ancient primal monster that the world feared. "Silas," Alaric said, his voice calm, which was far more terrifying than his shouting. "You knew." Silas, usually so confident, took a step back. "My lord, I thought it best not to disturb your recovery. You knew my mate was living in the squalor of the servants' quarters, and you said nothing." Alaric raised a hand. Shadows coalesced around his fingers. "And Vespera, you struck him. He is a servant," Vespera shrieked, sensing the shift in the air. "I am a queen. He," Alaric growled, his eyes bleeding into full black, "is the lord of this citadel, and you have touched what belongs to death." Alaric moved. It was too fast for human eyes to follow. He was simply in front of Vespera. He didn't use magic. He used his hand, gripping her throat and lifting her off the ground as if she weighed nothing. "Alaric, wait. The treaties," she gagged. "Burn the treaties," Alaric snarled. "You made him bleed." With a sickening crunch, he threw her across the room. She hit the stone wall and slid down, unconscious and broken. Silas turned to run, but the shadows Alaric had summoned lashed out, binding him to the floor. "We will discuss your loyalty later, Silas," Alaric said coldly. "And it will be a very, very long conversation." Alaric turned back to Julian. The monster vanished, replaced by the man. He walked to Julian and dropped to his knees, a position no alpha ever took, certainly not in front of witnesses. "My love," Alaric whispered, taking Julian's bruised hands in his. He kissed the cut on Julian's thumb, his tongue soothing the wound, his saliva knitting the skin back together with vampire healing. "I will spend the next eternity atoning for this." Julian reached down, brushing the hair from Alaric's forehead. "You have nothing to atone for, Alaric. You saved the resistance. You saved me." "I forgot you," Alaric said, his voice thick with self-loathing. "I looked at you and saw a stranger. But your soul didn't." Julian smiled through his tears. "You didn't kill me. You didn't exile me. Even without your mind, your heart knew." Alaric rose and swept Julian into his arms, bridal style. He looked around the room, at the broken furniture and the defeated enemies. "I am burning this room," Alaric stated. "I am burning the clothes you are wearing. And I am issuing a decree tonight. Anyone who looks at you with anything less than reverence will lose their eyes." Julian rested his head on Alaric's shoulder. "Can we just start with a bath? And maybe some real wine?" Alaric let out a low, ragged laugh. He kissed Julian's forehead, the bond between them roaring back to life, stronger, deeper, and darker than before. "Anything," Alaric swore. "Everything. The world is yours, Julian. I am just the monster who keeps it safe for you. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Alaric go from tyrant to groveling husband, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who treated you like a servant, even if he had amnesia? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,